In biblical terms, McCain failed to serve either God or mammon today. The Washington Post front-paging a long-simmering problem that McCain himself has made worse, the fact that his campaign is staffed, run, and kept solvent by lobbyists who have every reason to craft McCain policy in favor of the companies and sometimes the countries to whose patronage they owed their livelihood. Specifically, the Post fleshing out some half-dozen terrorists, dictators, and oppressive regimes who have enriched the bank account of top McCain advisor, longtime lobbyist Charlie Black, including Ferdinand Marcos of the Philippines and a high-profile attempt to make over the Angolan terrorist guerrilla Jonas Savimbi back in the 80s. Black saying in his defense that he stopped cashing their checks whenever the White House formally declared them bad guys. These days, Mr. Black is well known for making lobbying calls on behalf of his current clients until his supposed retirement from lobbying in March, literally from on board McCain's Straight Talk Express, and reportedly participating in this weekend's gathering at McCain's ranch to meet with potential vice presidential candidates. Turn now to Chuck Todd, political director of both MSNBC and NBC News. Chuck, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
I alluded to McCain making his problem worse here, first by staffing up with lobbyists, then not cleaning house after he won the nomination, only doing so now in this drawn-out, seemingly one-by-one process that if they planned it this way, couldn't guarantee continuing coverage of this any better than the way it's going on. What is going on here with McCain and the lobbyists? Why is it like this medieval torture to himself?
Well, a lot of Republicans I've talked to would like to know what's going on. It feels like one of those, literally, you're seeing cutting heard the expression "cutting off your nose to spite your face." We're seeing it play out in this whole sort of lobbyist debacle. On one hand, he's being very noble about what he's trying to do. On the other hand, it is difficult in Washington, D.C. I mean, look, Barack Obama's going to find this out when he tries to appoint a government that somehow, if he becomes president and put people in that have never done any lobbying, he's going to find a lot of academics that he has to tap and not many professional people that he can go to. So it is very difficult in this town, in Washington, D.C., to find people that don't have a connection to lobbying, and sometimes, in this case, that don't have a current connection to some lobbying clients.
Well, now, when those
clients that they're lobbying for.
All right, but when the lobbying, the people for whom they have lobbied comes out, it always seems to be this incredible list of people who were, deposed by Democratic revolutions or are in jail somewhere or are infamous in their own nations. McCain advisors have a record of just dealing with shady countries and characters for clients, or is it just that Sweden does not need lobbyists?
Well, I think it's more I mean, look, the fact is, you hire a lobbyist a lot of times because you need somebody else to make a better case for you. You don't necessarily, if you've got an easy case to make, you sometimes don't need a lobbyist to do these things for you here in Washington. So that's part of the issue. But, the other thing is it's just very difficult what he's trying to do because, like I said, a lot of folks connected, both in Republican politics and Democratic politics, to things that are not going to be very popular causes. It just happens whether it's somebody representing somebody who did some nasty things to American government or U.S. military installations, or it's somebody who represented a government who was trying to win favors with the U.S. who wasn't very popular with the U.S. government.
Yeah, Jonas Savimbi, for goodness sakes. What does McCain do about this without wholesale house cleaning of what are still dozens of lobbyists in there, as you point out, that if a president is going to need some people with some experience? Does he clean out the bad guys and keep the good guys? Are there any good guys? What does he do?
Well, this is the problem. The fact is, Charlie Black himself, I think a couple weeks ago, said, you know what, people and the voters usually don't care about these issues. The fact is, he's right. And that's what makes him making such a stand on this, McCain himself making a stand on this, only putting his own staff at peril, because Charlie Black has a lot of breadcrumbs for a reporter to follow. Rick Davis, the campaign manager, has a lot of lobbyist breadcrumbs for reporters to follow. So they're only asking for more scrutiny at a time when that's the last thing he needs. He's already carrying around a lot of the Republican brand baggage, so he caused himself more problems. I think part of this goes to McCain himself. He hates this idea that he won't be seen as the more reform-minded candidate. He hates this idea that Obama is trying to steal the reformist message from him. McCain's been the reform guy in Washington, and he wants to keep that mantle. And this idea of Obama taken away from him, I think it gets under his skin a little bit, and so they went out and they have a very aggressive policy, but now all it's done is invited scrutiny of their own staff, at a time when he needs to be ramping up and worried about the general election.
You quoted Charlie Black's famous observation that nobody cares about this outside the Beltway. Is that a permanent truth, or as this drags out, is it possible that some people among the undecideds or just in the electorate at large will begin to care?
Well, they'll begin to care if it somehow goes against McCain's image, right? I mean, that's when this stuff, when does any of this stuff rise up to matter? If it somehow goes up against, people will say that Reverend Wright doesn't matter to them, but if it somehow counters the image of Barack Obama, or the Charlie Black stuff isn't going to matter, but if it somehow counters the image of John McCain as a reformer. I mean, look, I've talked to a lot of Republicans who have been nervous about the people, that there are too many people around him that have done lobbying, and lobbying for guys that are, whether it's good guys or bad guys, or guys in the gray area, that are just inviting scrutiny to McCain that he doesn't need. He doesn't need to carry on. He doesn't need to acquire his own baggage. It's tough enough to run as a Republican in 2008 this year. Don't make it harder on yourself. And this lobbyist policy, it's made it harder on himself. I mean, you got the Washington Post. That didn't take very much work to put that story together about Charlie Black.
Oh, also, don't say gray area. That'll be, they'll call you about ageism if you say that. Chuck Todd, political director for NBC News and MSNBC. Sorry, didn't mean to make your day longer. Thank you, Chuck.
Yeah, exactly. You're just going to make more phone calls. Thanks, Keith.